Rita's journey is one filled with hope, love, and perseverance. From her heartfelt prayers for her mother's health to the courage she found to sing in the streets, Rita's determination to help her mother see again drives the entire story. Just as hope begins to fade, a miraculous encounter with a kind stranger, Alberto, opens up new possibilities. With his help, Rita's mother receives the much-needed treatment, and Rita discovers a path to her future. This touching story of struggle, hope, and eventual happiness reminds us that even in the darkest times, there is always a glimmer of light that can guide us through. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Oh Heavenly Father, I plead with you, do not forsake my dear mother. I beg you with all my heart, don't let her be swallowed by the darkness. Please give us the means to pay for her treatment. Let us find a way to restore her vision, so she can once again revel in the beauty of the flowers she cherishes so deeply. Let her be able to work again, maybe even sketch those delicate petals she so loves to draw. I truly believe, that there is nothing beyond your power, nothing in this world you cannot do. Rita, overwhelmed with emotion, made the sign of the cross and pressed her lips against the tiny icon on her bedside table, seeking comfort and strength. She climbed into her bed, exhausted from the weight of her worries, and drifted into a deep sleep almost instantly. In her slumber, she had an extraordinary dream, one that seemed to lift her from the world of pain and fear. She found herself standing on a hill, clothed in pure white, barefoot, her feet gently touching the soft earth beneath her. Her voice rose into the sky, crystal clear and powerful, as she sang from the depths of her soul. Below the hill, a crowd of people gathered, their eyes fixed on her with admiration. They clapped, showering her with flowers and soft toys, as if celebrating her very existence. Rita's heart overflowed with joy, a warmth as sweet as honey spreading through her body, enveloping her like a comforting embrace. The sensation was so deep, so rich, that it seemed to fill every corner of her being. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw her mother. She was standing in the distance, her face radiant with joy, waving with such happiness that it made Rita's heart soar even higher. Her mother could truly see her, and her eyes gleamed with happiness, no longer dimmed by illness. Filled with elation, Rita sang even louder, her voice lifting higher, intertwining with the sound of birds chirping in harmony with her song. But then, the dream faded as the harsh sound of the alarm clock pierced the air, pulling her back to reality. It was time to wake up, to prepare for another day at school. As Rita stretched, she could still feel the remnants of that blissful warmth, lingering like a tender memory. She knew what she had to do. I will sing in the square, she resolved with determination. I will sing my heart out and gather enough money for Mom's treatment. With renewed purpose, she got out of bed, ready to face the day. At school, Rita's mind was far away, lost in thoughts of her plan. She could barely focus on the lessons in front of her. All she could think about was standing in the square near the shopping center, singing the most moving songs she knew, hoping that the emotion in her voice would touch the hearts of passers-by. She imagined them stopping, their eyes filling with tears, moved by her voice, and reaching into their pockets to fill her little metal box, the same one she had used to store her childhood treasures. Rita Torres, what has your attention today? Señor Dazas, her Spanish teacher, snapped, breaking into her thoughts with a stern tone. Startled, Rita quickly rose from her seat, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. I'm sorry, sir, she muttered, lowering her eyes. My head has been aching since this morning. The teacher's frown softened. Perhaps you should visit the nurse. No, really, I'm fine, Rita insisted, slumping back into her chair, clutching her pen as if it could anchor her wandering mind. She tried to refocus, scribbling down notes as Señor Dazas continued to dictate, but her heart was elsewhere. After school, Rita returned home, where the familiar scent of dinner greeted her. Her mother was in the kitchen, carefully peeling vegetables despite her weakening vision. "Hi, Mommy," Rita greeted softly, placing a gentle kiss on her mother's cheek. "Hello, my sweet girl," her mother responded, her voice warm but tinged with fatigue. "How was school today?" "Everything was fine," Rita replied with a smile, though her heart ached. She reached for a knife, ready to help with the vegetables. "How are your eyes feeling today, Mom?" Melina sighed, her voice heavy with sorrow. "Oh, my precious child, I'm so sorry for all the trouble I've caused you," she said, her tone filled with regret. "I can't help but wonder, what will become of us when I lose my sight completely?" "Don't even think like that, Mom. You're not going to lose your sight, I swear. We'll find the money for your treatment, and soon you'll see the world again in all its vibrant colors and intricate details, I promise you." Rita insisted, her voice filled with a determination that she hoped would dispel her mother's doubts. Melina could only manage a faint smile in response, though her heart swelled with pride. What a wonderful daughter heaven had blessed her with. But as she looked around, she couldn't help but feel a deep sadness. What, after all, was there for her to see in vivid detail? Their life was so meager, so limited. She despised herself for how things had turned out. She felt as though she had failed in every possible way. She hadn't dared to move to the capital or even to a bigger city where opportunities might have been greater. Instead, she had spent years in the small local library, a job she could no longer manage as her vision continued to deteriorate. The treatment she needed was far beyond what they could afford, but where could they possibly find such money? In this vast world, it seemed like it was just the two of them, with no one else to lean on. Melina couldn't help but feel a crushing guilt for becoming a burden on Rita, who was still so young, not even 16. She should be living her life, finding joy in her youth. But how could she possibly be happy when she had a blind mother who needed constant care? Melina's mind was constantly racing, trying to think of ways to earn even a little money, to contribute something, anything. But so far, her efforts had led to nothing but dead ends. That evening, Rita dressed in her favorite sundress and grabbed the cookie tin that had become so important to her. It was a gift from Rosa, a kind woman whom her mother had cared for over the years. Thanks to Rosa's generosity, they now had a roof over their heads, a tiny, shabby apartment that was little more than a shack, but it was theirs. It was home. Before that, Melina and young Rita had been constantly on the move, bouncing from one rented room to another, unable to afford anything better. The square was nearly empty when Rita arrived. It was a weekday, and the weather had been gloomy, with rain showers passing through more than once. Rita found a spot near the shopping center, placed the cookie tin at her feet, and froze. The thought of singing in front of strangers terrified her, but there was no time to be scared. Her mother desperately needed treatment, and they couldn't afford to waste any more time. Steeling herself, Rita began to sing. At first, her voice was soft and hesitant, but as she continued, it grew louder and more confident. Soon, Rita was lost in the music, oblivious to the world around her. This always happened when she sang, especially with songs that struck a chord deep within her heart. And there were so many of those songs. People started to gather, drawn by the young girl's pure, beautiful voice. They stood and listened, some with expressions of admiration, but despite their interest, no one seemed in a hurry to drop even a single coin into her tin. Rita sang 3 songs, pouring her heart into each one, when suddenly, a burly security guard from the shopping center approached. "What's all this commotion?" he barked, his voice full of authority. "And you, little singer, better clear out before I report you to your parents." Rita's heart sank. "I'm not doing anything wrong," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I just really need money." The guard sneered, his eyes narrowing with contempt. "If you need a new lipstick, ask your dad for it," he mocked, his tone dripping with disdain. "Now get lost before I call the cops." His words stung like a slap in the face, but Rita held her ground for a moment longer, her heart heavy with the weight of her unfulfilled promise to her mother. Then, with a heavy sigh, she gathered her things and walked away, her head bowed, but her spirit unbroken. She would find another way, no matter what it took. The crowd gradually thinned out, and Rita was left standing there, her box empty and her heart heavy. With a deep sigh, she picked up the tin and began the long, lonely walk home. But something inside her held her back. She found herself turning, drawn towards the riverbank. Along the shore was a platform where groups of young people often gathered, laughing and chatting. Tonight, however, it was quiet, almost deserted. Rita slipped beneath a large, sheltering tree and, with the soft murmur of the river as her backdrop, began to sing once more. This time, her voice seemed to float more freely into the night air, catching the attention of the few couples who lingered nearby. They paused to listen, captivated by the haunting melody. One or two passers-by even tossed some spare change into her box. But as Rita's beauty and sweet voice caught their boyfriend's eyes, the girls began to tug them away, clearly feeling a twinge of jealousy. Rita had always adored singing. From the time she was a little girl, she had sung all the tunes she knew, starting with the cheerful songs from cartoons and later moving on to the more mature melodies she heard on the radio or TV. Her mother, Melina, never tired of hearing her. "You have the voice of an angel," she would say with pride. "You're destined for great things, my dear." But those great things had been slow to arrive, if they ever would. Instead of the bright, glorious future her mother had envisioned, life had been nothing but a monotonous cycle of gray days, filled with struggle and even hunger. That night, Rita barely earned a single euro for her efforts. It was such a small amount, almost laughable. What had she expected? This wasn't the capital, bustling with art lovers and opportunities. Still, she found solace in the fact that, at least here, no one had chased her away. As Rita walked home, she passed by the old church and paused. She opened her hand and let a few coins fall into the donation box, crossing herself as she whispered a quick prayer. She decided not to mention any of this to her mother, not yet. There was no point in adding to her worries. From that day forward, Rita made a habit of returning to the riverbank each evening. Sometimes she earned a little, just enough to keep hope alive, but the realization soon hit her she could sing here for the next 20 years and still never save enough for her mother's treatment. She needed a job, something steady and reliable, even if it was tough work. She would do whatever it took. She had to. For her mother, to ensure her mother's eyes would see again, to prevent the darkness from closing in forever. "I'll sing just one more time, and then that's it," Rita whispered to herself, steeling her resolve. She began singing the song her mother loved the most, the one that always seemed to bring a spark of joy to her tired eyes. Rita's voice echoed along the riverbank, carried by the evening breeze. The acoustics near the water were always perfect, and the song poured out of her effortlessly. Only the final chorus remained when she bent down to pick up her tin box. And that's when she saw him. A man, sharply dressed in an expensive business suit, was walking directly towards her. Rita's heart sank. Was he coming to tell her to leave, to scold her for singing here? She didn't care anymore. She had already made up her mind not to return. She straightened up, ready to go. "Wait," the man called out, raising his hand. His voice was commanding, but not unkind. "Please don't leave just yet. You have the voice of an angel. It's the most beautiful thing I've heard in a long time. Your voice deserves to be heard by the entire world." Rita smiled softly, though there was a sadness behind her eyes. "Thank you, sir, but I'm afraid that's not what I need. My needs are very different." "And what might those be?" he asked, curiosity flickering in his eyes. Rita sighed deeply. "It's nothing, really. Just a problem I don't think can be solved." The man took a step closer, his expression sincere. Sometimes it's better not to carry such burdens alone. You never know, maybe I can help in some way. And in return, perhaps you can help me. Rita's eyes widened in surprise. Yes, you, the man replied with a warm smile. If you're willing to sing at my bar. Though you're still young, I can see you have something special. He scratched his chin thoughtfully, as if weighing the decision. Are you really offering me a job? Rita could hardly believe what she was hearing. Joy and disbelief welled up inside her, nearly choking her words. This could mean I can finally save enough for my mom's treatment. Treatment? Are you sick? The man asked, his brows furrowing with concern. No, not me, Rita quickly clarified. It's my mother. She's losing her sight, and the treatment is incredibly expensive. I've been trying to figure out how to get the money. The man nodded slowly, a knowing look in his eyes. I told you, sometimes it's better not to keep things bottled up. You know, he added after a brief pause, my uncle happens to be a top microsurgeon in the capital. He's worked wonders for many people. That's amazing, Rita said, her hope rekindled, but she quickly felt it dim again. But it doesn't really change anything. Where could I possibly find the money to pay for this treatment? The man leaned forward, his gaze steady and encouraging. Tell me, can you sing a variety of songs? Not just the beautiful lyrical ones like earlier, but also something lively? Maybe even something sad? Rita nodded confidently. I can sing anything, she said, her voice firm. She took a deep breath and launched into a song. You know nothing about me, and you don't need to know at all what I dream about, awake and in my dreams, while you dance so passionately. The man's face lit up as she sang. When she finished, he clapped his hands enthusiastically. Bravo, that was fantastic. Now, show me something else. Without missing a beat, Rita tossed her hair back, securing it into a ponytail with the elastic on her wrist. Then she sang again, her voice filled with a passionate resolve. I won't give up anything for you, and don't ask my hand for my mother. Only music forever, my love. I don't have time to spend on romances. The man's applause grew even louder. But Rita, now lost in her music, let the emotion of her next song pour out, her voice softening as she sang a melody that seemed to resonate with the pain in her heart. Don't die. My dream, don't fade away. Hope, life will never be as it used to be. I'll light a lamp now in front of the ancient icon. I can understand everything in life, but not treason, not cheating, not cheating, not cheating, not cheating. As the last notes hung in the air, Rita seemed almost otherworldly, like a nymph born from the music itself. She stood still for a moment, as if emerging from the deep waters of emotion that each song had pulled her into. That was incredible, the man said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. You have a gift, Rita, and I think I might be able to help you more than you realize. What's your name? The man asked, his voice softened by the admiration he felt. Rita, she replied, her eyes sparkling with hope. So, are you going to hire me? Her face lit up with a bright smile, her heart pounding in her chest. You'll set the bar on fire with your voice, Rita, the man said with enthusiasm. In a month, people will be flocking in from the capital just to have a drink and listen to you sing. He paused, as if something was holding him back. Rita's smile faltered. But, am I not suitable after all? She asked, her voice tinged with sadness, her gaze searching his face for reassurance. It's not that, he said quickly. It's just that. You're so young. Rita shrugged, her confidence returning. Don't worry about that. You know, with a bit of makeup, I can easily look 20. The man chuckled, shaking his head in amazement. You're incredible, Rita. I can't pass up this opportunity. I'll personally make sure your mom gets the treatment she needs. I'll even handle it with my uncle. You just keep singing. Do you know the bar inside? Rita asked. Of course I do. There aren't many places like that around here, especially with such a charming name. And that tiled roof, it always reminds me of a house straight out of a fairy tale. Thanks. That's my father's creation, the man said with a touch of pride. I want to restore its former glory. My main business is in the capital, but I'm managing the bar here for now. Everyone tells me to sell it, that it's not worth the effort. But I refuse. I don't want to sell it, I want it to thrive. Can you imagine how magical the place will be once you start singing there? It'll be amazing. I'm ready, Rita said eagerly. Just tell me what to do. First, I need to talk to your mom, the man said, his tone more serious now. Rita's face immediately clouded with concern. No, not that. My mom absolutely can't get stressed. If she finds out I'm working to pay for her treatment, she'll be too anxious. Then how will she get the treatment she needs, the man asked, his brow furrowing with concern. I don't know, Rita admitted, thinking hard. We need to come up with a story. Tell her you're from social services and that she's been selected for some kind of promotion or special program. Make it sound like the treatment is free. The man looked at her with admiration. You're so grown up for your age. I wish my daughter had grown up like you, he sighed, then nodded. All right, we'll make it social services. Let's plan for tomorrow after 3 p.m. Give me your address, he said, pulling out his phone. Rita quickly recited her address, feeling a surge of relief wash over her. This was the break she'd been praying for, and she couldn't believe how quickly things were turning around. Tomorrow, everything could start changing for her mom, and for their future. Rita quickly recited her home address to the man, her voice filled with hope. He smiled warmly at her and said, By the way, my name is Alberto, and this is for you. He reached into his pocket and handed her a crisp 50 note. Rita's eyes widened in disbelief. She stared at the money, unsure whether to accept it. Take it, my girl, Alberto insisted gently. You brought me a few moments of incredible happiness with your singing. That kind of joy is worth so much more than money. Thank you, Rita whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she tucked the banknote into her tin box. She could hardly believe her luck. I'll be waiting for you tomorrow. I'll tell my mom that someone from social services is coming. I really hope this all works out. It will, Rita, Alberto said with a reassuring snap of his fingers. Things will work out for you. I'm sure of it. See you tomorrow, Siren. See you tomorrow, Rita called after him, her heart soaring. She hurried down the street, her steps light and full of anticipation. On a whim, she decided to stop at the small shop near her home and bought her mother's favorite coconut candies. It was a little indulgence, a small way to bring some joy to her mother's difficult days. When she arrived home, she shouted cheerfully from the doorway, Mama, I brought you something tasty. But there was no response. A knot of anxiety began to form in Rita's stomach. She hurried into the small kitchen, where she found her mother sitting at the table, her head resting heavily on her hand. Rita, where have you been? Milena asked, her voice weary and strained. Oh, I was just... Mom, it doesn't matter, Rita replied quickly, not wanting to worry her mother with unnecessary details. Let's have some tea. I got your favorite candies. My friend treated me. Milena looked at her daughter, concern etched on her face. What's wrong with you? Are you feeling pain? As always, sweetheart, Milena sighed, rubbing her nose and eyes with the back of her hand. The exhaustion was evident in her every movement. Rita noticed the empty bottle of painkillers on the counter and frowned. We're out of painkillers, Mama. Let me massage your head instead. It'll help you relax, and the pain will ease. Milena's eyes welled up with tears as she gazed at her daughter. Oh, my wonderful girl, she whispered, her voice breaking. You deserve so much better, a better mother, a better life. Mom, stop saying that, Rita scolded gently, kneeling beside her mother. I don't need another mom. You're the best mother in the world, And don't you dare let yourself get down like this. We're going to beat this strange illness of yours soon, I promise." Rita took a comb and began to gently brush through her mother's hair, her fingers moving slowly and tenderly. The simple act of caring for her mother brought her a sense of calm, and she could feel Melina starting to relax under her touch. For a moment, the weight of their troubles seemed to lift, and in that small kitchen, there was only love. "Rita, you have such wonderful hands," Melina murmured, her voice soft with affection. "They're as gentle and soothing as your angelic voice." Rita smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart. She hoped with every fiber of her being that soon her mother would regain her sight, that this dark chapter of their lives would come to an end, and that she would never feel this helpless again. The next day, at precisely 2:57 p.m., there was a knock at the door. Rita opened it to find Alberto standing on the doorstep, a folder of documents in his hands. He wasn't alone. Beside him was a charming young woman with a warm smile. Rita quickly led them inside and escorted them to her mother's room. It was only then that she realized she had forgotten to warn her mother about the social workers. But Alberto was in complete control, and his companion, Lourdes, was just as convincing. They played the role of social workers so perfectly that every word, every gesture seemed authentic. Everything was meticulously prepared. There wasn't a single detail out of place. Melina was surprised, of course, but she wanted to believe. Perhaps she had no other choice, for that morning she had awoken to find that her vision had deteriorated even further. She could barely see anything at all. "Mom, I'm heading to the store," Rita called out after the visit, stepping outside with Alberto and Lourdes. As they walked down the street, Alberto turned to her and said, "I've arranged everything for tomorrow. I'll take your mom to the clinic myself. Are you ready in case she needs to stay there?" Rita nodded resolutely. "I was ready yesterday. Thank you so much. I can never repay you for this, probably not even in my lifetime, but I'm willing to try." Alberto shook his head with a knowing smile. "You're wrong. With a voice like yours, you'll pay it back sooner than you think." And he was right. The next day, Melina was admitted to the clinic. She received her first treatment and injection, followed by several complex procedures, all within hours of her arrival. Alberto kept his promise. Meanwhile, Rita was preparing to sing at the bar. The thought made her anxious. She had never set foot in such a place before, and the idea of performing in front of a crowd of strangers felt overwhelming. But everything had been arranged for her: the outfit, the plan. Lourdes, who had turned out to be a waitress at the bar, suggested that Rita wear a mask for her performance. First of all, Lourdes explained with a grin, "It'll make it harder for anyone who knows you to recognize you if they happen to come to the bar. And second, it adds an air of mystery. No one will know your age for sure," she laughed playfully. "That sounds perfect," Rita agreed, feeling a bit more at ease. Then she asked, "Do you think you could come up with a stage name for me?" Lourdes thought for a moment before her eyes lit up. "How about Nightingale?" Rita smiled, the name resonating with her. "Nightingale, I like that. It's perfect." As they prepared for the evening ahead, Rita felt a surge of determination. She wasn't just singing for herself anymore, she was singing for her mother, for their future, and for the hope that was finally beginning to bloom in her heart. "Why Nightingale?" "That's a bird," Rita asked, curiosity in her voice. "Because you sing better than any bird," Alberto replied with a grin. "And did you know that nightingales often sing before a storm or at dawn, and sometimes in the quiet of the night? It's perfect for our bar, a symbol of resilience and beauty." "Awesome. Nightingale it is," Rita beamed. "Ready to stay up past your bedtime? You still have school?" Alberto teased gently. "Oh, but tomorrow's a holiday, right? I'm ready to stay up all night if it means my mom gets the treatment she needs," Rita said with unwavering determination. Lourdes, watching her with admiration, smiled softly. "You're such a good girl, Rita, taking care of your mom the way you do." "I have no one else on this planet but her," Rita said, her voice filled with emotion. "I love her more than life itself. I'll do anything to make her healthy and happy again." Lourdes didn't say anything, but the warmth in her eyes spoke volumes. She wrapped Rita in a gentle hug, patting her on the back. Rita felt the sting of tears rising but quickly blinked them away. Her makeup was already perfectly done for the stage, and she couldn't afford to ruin it now. The plan was simple. Rita would start by singing 2 or 3 songs, but the night took an unexpected turn as the bar patrons became entranced by her voice. They didn't want to let her leave. Requests began pouring in, and they even started handing her bills as tips, urging her to sing more. Rita couldn't help but smile. She sang and sang, losing track of time, her voice filling the room with a magic that captivated everyone. By the time she finally got home, it was nearly 3 in the morning. Exhausted and parched, Rita barely managed to make it to bed. She was grateful that tomorrow was a holiday. No school meant she could sleep in and recover. After a brief conversation with Alberto, they had agreed that Rita would perform on Fridays and Saturdays, ensuring that her schoolwork wouldn't suffer. During holidays, she could work more often. It was the perfect arrangement. That night, as she drifted into a deep sleep, Rita dreamt of little birds landing on her hands, their tiny beaks chirping the softest, sweetest melodies. The sound was so tender, so pure, that it made her heart ache with emotion. She felt as though she might cry from the beauty of it all. Her peaceful dream was interrupted by the ringing of her phone. Groggy, she picked it up and heard her mother's cheerful voice on the other end. "My sunshine," Hi Melina greeted her warmly. "Hi, Mommy. How are you feeling?" Rita asked, relief flooding through her. "I'm doing well," Melina replied. "The doctors and nurses here are wonderful, so attentive and kind. And my head hardly hurts anymore." Rita smiled, feeling a weight lift off her shoulders. "That's amazing, Mom. I'm so glad to hear that. Just rest and get better. I'll take care of everything else." "I'm so glad, Mom." "Soon you'll be seeing like an eagle again," Rita exclaimed, her voice full of optimism. "Now, tell me more about how you're doing. Have you eaten?" "Of course I've eaten," Melina chuckled softly. "I'm not a little kid, Rita. I'll be fine. I can take care of myself." "All right, Mom," Rita replied with a smile. "I'll call you when I get the chance. Bye for now." "Bye, my love. I love you." "I love you too." Mommy Rita ended the call, feeling a mix of relief and lingering worry. It had been over a week since Rita had been living alone, and though Melina was feeling much better, her treatment wasn't complete. Alberto and Lourdes had been checking in on Rita regularly, offering help whenever they could, but tonight was different. It was Friday, and Rita was getting ready for another performance at the bar. Usually Alberto would send someone to accompany her, but tonight he was busy with urgent matters, and it seemed he had forgotten to arrange it. Still, the bar wasn't far, and the streets were well lit, so Rita decided to walk. As she made her way through the quiet streets, a voice called out to her. "Hey, sweetie, could you help me?" Rita turned to see an older woman standing next to a worn-out car, the door open. Her face was lined with age, and she appeared to be struggling with something inside the vehicle. "What happened?" Rita asked, concerned. "My phone slipped under the seat, and I just can't seem to reach it," the woman explained, frustration evident in her voice. "Oh, I can help with that," Rita offered kindly, stepping closer and leaning into the car to find the phone. But just as she bent over, she felt a sharp blow to the back of her head. The world around her went dark. When Rita regained consciousness, she found herself lying in the back seat of the car, her hands bound tightly and her mouth covered with tape. Panic surged through her veins as she realized what had happened. Why would this elderly woman tie her up? Where was she being taken in the dead of night? The car sped along the highway, the lights of the city fading into the distance. Dark forests lined the road, their silhouettes eerie under the glow of the full moon. Occasionally, the haunting calls of nocturnal birds pierced the silence, making the situation feel even more surreal. Rita's heart pounded in her chest as fear gripped her, cold and unrelenting. What would happen to her? How could she possibly escape this nightmare? She glanced at the woman in the front seat, trying to make sense of her captor. The woman seemed focused, her gaze fixed on the road ahead. Was she truly crazy, or had she mistaken Rita for someone else? Rita's mind raced with questions, but there were no answers. All she knew was that she had to stay calm and find a way out. The car continued its relentless journey into the unknown, the moon watching over them like a silent witness. Rita swallowed hard, her mouth dry from fear and the tightness of the tape. She couldn't let her mind spiral into despair. She had to think of her mother, who needed her now more than ever. She couldn't give up. She had to find a way to survive this. Questions flooded Rita's mind, swirling and crashing into one another, but there were no answers, no clarity, only fear. Suddenly, the car made a sharp right turn onto a narrow, unpaved road. The tires crunched over gravel as they continued deeper into the forest. After what felt like an eternity, the car came to a stop. "Get out," the woman ordered, yanking the door open. Rita hesitated only for a moment before obeying. Stepping out into the darkness, her heart raced. The dense forest surrounded them like a cage, and every shadow seemed to hide an unseen danger. The terror of being abandoned in the wilderness with this mad woman gnawed at her insides. "Move forward," the woman's voice was muffled, almost inhuman, sending chills down Rita's spine. Rita forced her legs to move, stumbling forward along a narrow path. Her thoughts raced. She had to escape, but how? She glanced back, trying to assess her captor. In the dim moonlight, the woman's face was grotesque, distorted by deep wrinkles, an ugly wart on her nose, and eyes that gleamed with a cruel intoxication. They were the eyes of someone capable of terrible things. Forward, the woman barked, shining a flashlight on the narrow trail, its beam cutting through the suffocating darkness. The night was cold, and Rita's thin shirt did nothing to shield her from the biting air. She trembled, though she wasn't sure if it was from the cold or the overwhelming fear. The forest was ancient, the towering trees blocking out most of the moonlight. The occasional crack of a branch underfoot made her jump. This was like a scene from a nightmare, where the real monster wasn't hiding in the bushes, it was walking right behind her, shoving her forward with a relentless hand. "Stop," the woman commanded. Rita froze, her body stiff with dread. She turned around slowly, fear gripping her throat. The woman was holding a rope, her intentions clear in her cold, calculating eyes. Was she going to strangle her? Tie her up and leave her here to die? Rita's mind raced, but there was no escape, no way out. But just as the panic began to overwhelm her, something unexpected happened. A low, menacing growl pierced the silence. The woman cursed under her breath, her eyes darting around. "Damn it, probably a coyote," she muttered, scanning the surrounding trees. The growling grew louder, closer. Rita held her breath, paralyzed by fear. What could she do with her hands tied? Absolutely nothing. She glanced at the woman, her eyes wide with a silent plea for mercy. The woman's expression shifted from cruelty to panic. She began backing away slowly at first, then faster and faster, her fear clearly mounting. Finally, with a sudden burst of energy, she turned and ran, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. Rita stood there, stunned, the growling still echoing in her ears. She was alone, tied up, and utterly vulnerable, but her captor was gone. She had no idea where she was or how she could get to safety, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she had a sliver of hope. Rita's breath hitched as a sinking realization dawned on her. Her time was running out. It was only a matter of minutes, maybe even seconds, before some wild beast, perhaps more than one, would leap out of the darkness and tear her apart. Fear gripped her with icy hands as she pressed herself tightly against a nearby tree, its rough bark biting into her skin. The air was thick with tension, every rustle of leaves, every low growl sending fresh waves of terror through her. And then, she heard it. A cough. A human cough. But what could a person possibly be doing out here in the wilderness at such an ungodly hour? Rita's mind raced with awful possibilities. Perhaps they had been attacked by the same animal that was now lurking nearby, waiting to finish her off too. Maybe they were lying somewhere in the shadows, bleeding out, helpless against the very predator that would soon turn its attention to her. She squeezed her eyes shut, every nerve in her body screaming with fear. People always said you should face danger head-on, but how could she? She was just a girl barely 16 facing something far too terrifying, far too overwhelming for her young heart to bear. Then, suddenly, the bushes ahead of her rustled violently, and someone burst through them, rushing straight towards her. Rita, a male voice called out urgently, "Quiet, Sam, quiet." She could barely react, only managing to mumble through the gag that still bound her mouth. A bright beam of light from a flashlight cut through the darkness, blinding her. Rita flinched, shutting her eyes tightly, her hands still tied behind her back, utterly defenseless. "Holy Virgin Mary," the man exclaimed, his voice a mix of shock and concern. "What on earth are you doing out here, kid?" The flashlight's beam danced across his eyes, and in the dim moonlight, Rita could make out his greasy hair and a worn expression. "Who taped your mouth shut? Poor thing," he asked, reaching out to yank off the tape. It tore away painfully, stinging her skin, but the discomfort was brief, a minor relief in the storm of terror she was feeling. I don't know," Rita stammered, her voice trembling. "I really don't know who brought me here." It was some woman. Her face looked like something straight out of a horror movie. She couldn't hold back the sobs that rose in her throat, the fear and confusion finally spilling over. "Come on, darling," the man said softly, his voice a strange mix of tenderness and roughness as he knelt to untie the ropes around her wrists. "Let's get you to the cabin. You'll be safe there." A cabin? Of course there had to be a cabin. Rita's mind raced with dark thoughts. Was this part of some twisted sacrificial ritual? Her imagination spun wild tales of horror, but what choice did she have? She couldn't run. Where would she go in this vast, dark forest? Straight into the jaws of coyotes, perhaps. Or maybe she'd end up lost, wandering endlessly through the woods until she withered away. No, the cabin was her only option, terrifying as it sounded. But when they reached the cabin, it wasn't the nightmarish place she had feared. Instead, it was surprisingly cozy. A gentle, flickering oil lamp cast a warm glow over the wooden table, giving the room an almost fairy tale-like atmosphere. In the corner stood a small cot with a neatly made bed, and the air was filled with the soothing sense of honey and spices. The space breathed peace, tranquility, a stark contrast to the terror outside. "I'll make you some of my signature Ural tea," the man said kindly, moving towards the stove. "You sit down and rest. What's your name, sweetheart?" "Rita," she replied quietly, rubbing her sore, swollen wrists, still trying to make sense of everything. "Rita Torres," the man repeated, as if savoring the sound of it. He smiled, pouring water into a stout teapot. "That's a beautiful name, and you're quite a beauty yourself." Rita blinked, confused by his words. "Whose eyes? Who are you talking about?" "Oh, no one," he said, his voice trailing off into a distant sigh. "Just me, haunted by old memories. A girl named Millie who disappeared from my life so suddenly." "Millie," Rita echoed, as if in a trance. The name stirred something deep within her. "I had a hamster named Millie when I was little." Mom used to laugh and say our hamster was named after her. I even made a funny sign for her cage. On one side it said Millie and on the other, Melina. The man chuckled softly, though his eyes remained shadowed by whatever memories he was reliving. Funny how names can hold so much weight, don't you think? They linger in our hearts, even when everything else fades away. The man suddenly dropped a package from his hands. Whether it was nuts or crackers, Rita couldn't tell. His expression shifted, as if he was struck by a memory he hadn't wanted to revisit. "Melina," he murmured, his voice distant. "The girl I loved with all my heart was named Melina. Such a melodious name." "What happened to her?" Rita asked softly, sensing the depth of his sorrow. "She just disappeared," he replied, a trace of bitterness in his voice. "We were close, talking about getting married, building a life together. And then, out of nowhere, she vanished, changed her phone number. No goodbye, no explanation." Rita's brow furrowed. "And you didn't try to find her?" "I tried," he said, shaking his head, his hands gripping the edge of the table. "But she never told me where she lived. I searched, tried to track her through registration, but it was like she vanished into thin air. I was desperate. I tore my hair out trying to understand what went wrong. And even now, every night when the world falls silent, I still think of her." Rita took a sip of the tea he had made for her, its warmth spreading through her body, calming her nerves. "Do you live here, in this wilderness?" she asked, her voice gentle. "No," Adam replied, glancing around the cabin. "This place, it's a retreat for me, a place of strength. I come here sometimes to escape, to reflect on life and the love I lost. It's a space where I can be alone with my thoughts, away from the world." "That's sad," Rita said softly. "My mom has her own complicated story with love. She never really talks about it, but she's never forgotten my dad. She refuses to speak about him, but I know she's still haunted by the past." Rita suddenly remembered her job. "Oh, I need to make a call. I didn't show up at work today." "You work? But you're so young," Adam remarked, his surprise evident. "I sing in a bar," Rita explained as she rummaged through her backpack for her phone. "We needed the money for my mom's treatment." She pulled out her phone, only to find it dead. "Oops, battery's dead. I'll have to call from home." Adam studied her for a moment before speaking. "Why don't you stay here for the night? It's late, and you've had a rough day. In the morning, I'll take you home." He extended his hand. "By the way, I'm Adam." "Nice to meet you, Adam," Rita replied with a small smile. "I guess I don't have much of a choice, do I?" "No, not really," Adam said with a chuckle. "Go ahead, lie down on the cot and rest. You'll be safe here." Rita hesitated, then asked, "And you? Where will you sleep?" "I'll stay up and keep watch," Adam replied, his voice calm and reassuring. "You need the rest more than I do." Rita nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and unease. She lay down on the cot, her body sinking into the softness of the blankets. Despite everything, exhaustion quickly overtook her, and soon she drifted off to sleep, the warmth of the cabin and the comforting scent of honey and spices offering her a brief reprieve from the fear that had gripped her earlier. "Don't worry about me," Adam reassured her, nodding towards a distant corner where a simple mattress was laid out beside shelves that occupied the entire wall. "I've got my own place to rest." Strangely, Rita felt a deep sense of calm wash over her, a serenity she hadn't felt in years. It reminded her of her childhood, when she would crawl into her mother's bed on stormy nights, seeking warmth and comfort as they snuggled together, falling asleep in each other's arms. Despite having only known Adam for less than an hour, she felt an inexplicable sense of safety in his presence. It was as though, for just a brief moment, the chaos of the world couldn't touch her. Sam, the St. Bernard dog who had been with Adam, settled down beside the cot. The large dog let out a deep sigh before quickly drifting off to sleep. Rita watched him for a moment, then closed her eyes, the exhaustion of the night catching up with her. Soon she too was asleep, her dreams filled with peaceful images. She dreamt of her mother walking along the serene seashore, the waves gently lapping at the shore. Adam was there too, walking beside her mother. They were laughing together, sharing cookies from the very same tin box Rita had used to collect the coins her listeners had given her on the riverbank. While Rita and Sam slept peacefully, Adam lay awake on his mattress, his mind consumed by memories of a time long past. He stared up at the dark ceiling, unable to escape the thoughts that had haunted him for so long. He remembered Melina, the woman who had once filled his life with light, only to vanish just as suddenly as she had appeared. The happiness they had shared seemed so close, so real, yet it had slipped through his fingers like sand. He vividly recalled the day they met, a moment that had felt like fate. It had been an ordinary day at the market, where he was working for his uncle, selling vegetables. She had appeared in front of him, looking for lettuce. "I love lettuce," she had said with a bright smile, her eyes sparkling with warmth. She was so fresh, so genuine, without a trace of pretense. "Then I'll give you a whole bunch," Adam had replied, unable to resist returning her smile. "No, no," she had laughed, her voice light and melodic. "You'll get into trouble if you give away vegetables to customers." But Adam had ignored her concern, his mind already spinning with a bold idea. "How about this?" he had said, his heart pounding with sudden courage. "Will you take a walk with me tonight?" She had looked at him with a playful grin, clearly amused. "So that's what this is about," she had teased. "And here I thought it was just a kind gesture from the heart." "It is a surge of the soul," Adam had replied earnestly, fumbling over his words. "I'm not very good at this, wooing girls. So what do you say? A walk tonight?" Her smile had softened, and she had agreed. "Yes, exactly. Why not take a walk? Especially since my friend Anita asked me to come later tonight. She's planning a romantic evening with Valino." Adam's heart had leaped at her answer. "Great. I'm Adam, by the way. Shall we meet by the wooden elephant in the old park?" "I love that park," she had said, her eyes lighting up. 7 o'clock work for you?" "It works," Adam had replied, his eyes sparkling with excitement. That night had been the beginning of something magical, or so he had thought. But as the memories played out in his mind, the joy was tainted by the bitter aftertaste of her disappearance. She had vanished without a trace, leaving him with nothing but questions and a lingering ache in his heart. As Adam lay there, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that life had an uncanny way of bringing people together, only to tear them apart. And yet, here he was, a stranger's daughter under his roof, somehow entwined in the threads of his past. Adam had placed an enormous bunch of lettuce into a paper bag, handing it over to the girl with a playful grin. "Most people give flowers, but me, I give lettuce." Melina had laughed, a sound as light as the spring breeze. "Thank you. Honestly, I love lettuce far more than flowers. Flowers just wither and die in a vase, but lettuce, it's fresh and alive," she had said with that signature smile of hers, then hurried off, leaving Adam standing there, watching her go, feeling like something extraordinary had just begun. At that time, Adam had been living with his uncle and aunt. Their love and care had always been divided between their daughter Laura and Adam, ever since his parents had passed away when he was just a boy. Laura had married and moved to the neighboring town, only visiting her family on occasion. His aunt and uncle were delighted to hear that Adam had met someone special, but Adam, ever cautious, held off on introducing Melina to them until he was certain their feelings were real, mutual, and strong. Melina, on the other hand, had been living with a friend. They rented a small, rundown shack and worked together at a cafeteria, scraping by as best they could. Meeting Adam had turned her world upside down. She had never felt like this before, this all-consuming, soul-deep kind of love. At 19, it was the first time her heart had truly opened. They spent hours together, walking through the park, talking about everything and nothing, sharing dreams and fears. And in the quiet corners of the park, where no one could see them, they kissed, feeling a kind of happiness that seemed almost too good to be true. It was the kind of joy that one only experiences in childhood, when life is simple and love feels like the safest place in the world. Their romance had flourished in secret at Adam's friend's place. His friend frequently traveled, and he had generously offered his apartment to the young couple during his absences. It became their haven, a space where they could dream and plan a future together. They talked about their wedding, about having a place of their own no matter how small. Adam was nearly done with medical school and was on the verge of becoming a therapist. He spent most of his time in the capital, only returning to the town during vacations. His future had seemed clear until Melina had entered his life and changed everything. But then, one day, she didn't show up for their date. It wasn't like her; she was always so excited to see him. They had spoken just half an hour before, and she had been her usual cheerful self, telling him how much she missed him and couldn't wait to see him. But when the time came, she never appeared. His calls went unanswered, met only with the cold, impersonal message, "The subscriber is temporarily unavailable." That's when the panic had set in. Adam had realized, too late, just how little he knew about her life outside of their time together. He didn't know her friend's name, didn't know where exactly they lived, didn't even know her last name. It seemed ridiculous now, how deeply he had loved her, how much he had planned a future with her, and yet he had never thought to ask for such basic details. He had searched everywhere, asked around, but it was as if Melina had vanished into thin air. One moment she had been there, filling his life with light and warmth, and the next she was gone, leaving behind only memories and an ache that never quite went away. Adam had regretted so many things, since then regretted not pressing for more information, not finding a way to hold on to her. But life had moved on, dragging him along with it, even as a part of him remained stuck in that moment of loss. Now, lying on his mattress in the cabin, Adam couldn't help but wonder where she was, if she was happy, and if she ever thought of him the way he still thought of her. Maybe she found someone else. Adam had thought countless times. Maybe she chose to leave him behind and move on. But deep down, he couldn't bring himself to believe it. He had loved Melina with everything he had, and the suddenness of her disappearance had left him utterly shattered. In the months that followed, Adam had suffered in silence. He lost weight, barely eating, and his once vibrant spirit dulled. His uncle and aunt had worried incessantly, trying to comfort him, but nothing seemed to ease his pain. Eventually, the time came for him to return to school. Adam had thrown himself into his studies with fierce determination, using the intensity of his coursework to block out the memories. He resolved that, no matter what, he would become an excellent doctor and would never waste his life on what he now called nonsense like love and pretty girls with lively walks. He had built walls around his heart, convincing himself that love was an unnecessary distraction. He never met his soulmate again, and the hole in his heart never fully healed. Sometimes, when the pain resurfaced, when the memories bled through, he would retreat to the woods, seeking solace in the solitude that nature provided. It had been over 15 years since Melina had disappeared, and Adam had grown into a hardened bachelor. Life alone had its challenges, but he had adapted. And yet, thoughts of Melina lingered, ghost-like, in the corners of his mind. What had happened to her? How had her life unfolded after she left him behind? Adam had no answers, and he knew he never would. They had drifted apart like specks of sand on a seashore, carried away by different tides. But despite the years, he never stopped thinking about the girl who had captured his heart so completely. He couldn't bring himself to be angry with her. Instead, he realized he had been in love with not just her, but with the memories of those fleeting weeks, the only true happiness he had known that summer. The soft nudge of a cold, wet nose against her cheek woke Rita from her sleep. She opened her eyes to find Sam, the Saint Bernard, wagging his tail and giving her nose a gentle lick. "You're so sweet," Sam Rita said groggily, reaching out to stroke the dog's big, furry head. The warmth of his presence brought a smile to her face. "Good morning," Adam greeted her as he stepped into the cabin, a slight smile on his face. "Good morning," Rita replied, sitting up on the cot. "I slept like a baby." "I'm glad to hear that." "The forest has a way of taking our worries away," Adam said, though there was a hint of melancholy in his voice that he couldn't quite suppress. He quickly changed the subject. "So how about some tea before we head out?" Rita nodded. "Yes, I'm ready to go now." Adam busied himself with preparing the tea, and as the warm, fragrant steam filled the cabin, they both felt the quiet comfort of the morning. For Adam, it was another day to push forward, carrying his past with him, while for Rita, it was a day filled with hope, a hope that her mother's treatment would bring brighter days ahead. "The wash basin is out behind the cabin, and there's a toilet there too," Adam said as he stepped outside, Sam faithfully trailing behind him. The cool morning air was a refreshing contrast to the warmth of the cabin, a reminder that the world outside was waiting for them. Later that morning, as they drove down the winding road, Adam suddenly broke the silence. "How's your mom doing? You mentioned she's going through some serious treatment." Rita's expression darkened slightly as she recalled the frightening situation. Her vision started fading so suddenly. "The doctor said it's likely from severe stress, something about blood vessels constricting. I don't really understand the details, but it all happened so fast, and the treatment, it's incredibly expensive." Adam glanced over at her, his eyes filled with compassion. "Let me help. I'm a doctor too, even though I don't specialize in eyes. Maybe I can do something to ease the burden." Rita turned to him, gratitude shining in her eyes. "Thank you, Adam. That's really kind of you. She's already started the treatment, and that's why I sing at Alberto's bar. It's called Insight. Have you heard of it?" "Insight?" Adam asked, his brow furrowing as he tried to place the name. "Is that the one with the small fountain that lights up at night?" "Yes, that's the one," Rita confirmed with a nod. "I perform there every Friday and Saturday." "Do you sing well?" Adam asked, a playful smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Rita shrugged modestly. "People seem to enjoy it," she answered, trying to downplay her talent. "Well, now I know exactly where to go when I want to hear the voice of a beautiful singer," Adam said with a warm smile as they approached Rita's home. Before parting ways, Adam handed her a small business card. "Just in case," he said quietly, not wanting to make a big deal of it, but his gesture carried the weight of concern and a promise of support. Rita took the card and waved goodbye as Adam drove away. As she turned towards her building, she noticed Lourdes standing near the entrance, her face pale and anxious. "Rita, Blessed Virgin, where have you been?" Lourdes exclaimed, her voice trembling with a mixture of relief and agitation. "Alberto is losing his mind. He's been grilling Bianca for hours, and now her mother is threatening to kill herself." Rita blinked in confusion as she hugged Lourdes, still waving at Adam. "Wait, who's Bianca? And why would Alberto be involved with her mother's suicide threats?" "Come on, let's get inside," Lourdes urged, practically dragging Rita through the door. "We need to call Alberto before something terrible happens." "Can you finally explain who Bianca is and why Alberto is so worked up?" Rita blurted out, unable to contain her frustration any longer. Her life felt like it had spiraled into a suspenseful thriller, and she was desperate for answers. Lourdes sighed, clearly understanding Rita's need for clarity. "Bianca used to work at the bar before you started. She sang there too, but her voice wasn't anywhere near as good as yours. Still, Alberto kept her on because he didn't have anyone better at the time. But just a few days before Alberto discovered you." Bianca fell ill. That's when Alberto decided to let her go. He informed her that her services were no longer needed and gave her a small severance pay. Rita listened intently as Lourdes continued. When Bianca told her mother what had happened, the woman flew into a rage. She stormed into the bar, causing a huge scene, and threatened to burn the place down and kill anyone who took Bianca's spot. Alberto thought she was just being hysterical and dismissed her threats as empty. But when you didn't show up for work, those threats came rushing back to him. What did he do? Rita asked, her anxiety growing with each passing moment. Alberto panicked. Lourdes explained. He went straight to Bianca's house to confront her mother. When he arrived, Bianca was home alone and had no idea where her mother was. Apparently, the woman never bothered to tell her daughter where she went or what she was up to. So Alberto waited there, hoping she would return. Early in the morning, the mother finally came home, reeking of alcohol. That's when Alberto jumped out of hiding and demanded answers, threatening to involve the police if she didn't tell him where you were. And then Rita pressed, her heart pounding in her chest. The woman tried to brush him off, claiming she didn't know anything about you and insisting that no one could ever replace her daughter. But Alberto didn't believe her. He kept pushing, and when she realized he wasn't going to back down, she started to crack. She mumbled something about seeing a girl who looked like you hitchhiking on the highway, but Alberto didn't buy it. So he did something drastic. He pulled out a stun gun that he always carries for protection. A stun gun, Rita exclaimed, shocked by this revelation. Yes, Lourdes confirmed, her voice tense. Life can be full of surprises, can't it? Alberto pointed the stun gun at her face and said, "If you don't tell me the truth, you're going to regret it." She was terrified and finally confessed that she had driven you out to the forest, but she wasn't exactly sure where she left you. Rita's mind reeled as she absorbed what Lourdes was telling her. The realization of how close she had come to real danger sent a chill down her spine. Lourdes finished the story by explaining that as soon as Alberto got confirmation that Rita was safe thanks to a frantic call from Lourdes, he rushed back to town, relieved but still deeply shaken. The next day brought an unexpected surprise. Melina returned home from the clinic without any prior warning. She arrived by train, catching Rita completely off guard. Rita was in the middle of eating a bowl of cereal when she saw her mother walk through the door, and the shock nearly caused her to drop her spoon. Mommy, why didn't you tell me you were coming back?" "How did you get here?" Rita exclaimed, rushing to her mother's side. "By train," Melina replied simply, a gentle smile on her face. "And I brought your favorite cookies." Rita's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and joy. The familiar comfort of having her mother back, safe and sound, was almost overwhelming. She hugged Melina tightly, grateful to have her home, and for a moment, the chaos of the past few days melted away, replaced by the warmth of family and the simple pleasure of a favorite treat shared with someone she loved. "Mama, I missed you so much," Rita exclaimed as she wrapped her arms tightly around her mother, tears welling up in her eyes. The overwhelming relief of having Melina back at home was almost too much to contain. "My girl," Melina whispered, gently stroking Rita's back, her voice filled with warmth. "I missed you very much too." Rita pulled back slightly, searching her mother's face for signs of how she was really doing. "How are you?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "I'm doing okay," Melina replied with a small smile. "The doctor said it will take some more time for my vision to fully recover, but I'm on the right track." "Did he say why this happened to you in the first place?" Rita asked, her brow furrowing in worry. Melina was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant as if she were looking back into a past she had tried to forget. "It's an echo of the past, Riri," she finally said, using the affectionate nickname she had called Rita when she was little. "The past? What do you mean? Did you used to work in a chemical factory or something?" Rita asked, puzzled by her mother's cryptic words. Melina let out a deep sigh as she sank into a chair, her legs visibly tired. "No, it's not that," she said, rubbing her temples. "I saw him recently, at the supermarket near our house, just a little over a month ago." Rita's heart skipped a beat. "Mom, you're scaring me. Who did you see? Sasquatch or something?" She tried to lighten the mood, but there was an edge of anxiety in her voice. "Your father," Melina said quietly. What Rita was stunned, her mind reeling. "But you always told me you didn't know where he was, that he had his own family somewhere." "That's true. I don't know where he is or what his life is like now," Melina explained, her voice tinged with sadness. "But he was definitely at the supermarket near our house that day." "Did you talk to him?" Rita asked, her emotions a mix of shock and curiosity. "No, of course not," Melina replied, shaking her head. "But I did something I probably shouldn't have." Rita looked at her mother, half joking but also genuinely concerned. "What did you do? Did you kiss him in the middle of the supermarket?" "Rita, stop teasing," Melina said softly, though there was a hint of a smile on her lips. "I took a picture of him. He didn't see me, didn't notice what I was doing." Rita stared at her mother, a mix of emotions swirling inside her: confusion, curiosity, and a deep concern for what her mother had been going through. "Why did you do that, Mom?" "I don't know," Melina admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe I just needed proof that he was real, that our past really happened, that he's not just a ghost from my memories." Rita reached out and took her mother's hand, squeezing it gently. "It's okay, Mom. Whatever happened, we'll get through it together." Melina nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "I just don't want the past to haunt you the way it haunts me, Riri. You deserve better." Rita leaned in, hugging her mother again, more tightly this time. "We both deserve better, Mama, and we'll find a way to move forward together." Rita stared at her mother, her mind reeling with disbelief. "Do you want to see your father?" Melina asked suddenly, pulling out her cell phone, her hands trembling slightly as she navigated to the photo. I don't know," Rita stammered, caught off guard by the question. "Show me." Melina handed over her old smartphone. The screen faded and scratched, but the image was clear enough. Rita squinted at the picture, her heart racing. Then, all at once, recognition dawned on her, and she gasped, "No way, this can't be." "What? What do you mean? What can't be?" Melina asked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Do you two know each other?" Rita asked, her voice trembling as she tried to make sense of it all. "Mom, we met just the other day. He's the one who saved me from that crazy woman." Melina's face drained of color, and she stared at her daughter in shock. "Rita, how could you keep this from me? What happened? Tell me everything." Rita took a deep breath and began to recount the entire story, from her work at the bar to the terrifying night in the forest, and how Adam had come to her rescue. As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes, the emotions of the past few days catching up with her. "Mom," she said softly, her voice breaking, "he loved you. He's loved you all his life." Melina wiped away a few tears of her own, her hands shaking as she processed the weight of Rita's words. "I left him all those years ago," she whispered, her voice filled with regret. "I didn't even give him an explanation. I just disappeared. What if he's angry with me?" Rita shook her head, her heart aching for her mother. "He's not angry, Mom. He's never stopped loving you. You should have seen the pain in his eyes when he talked about the girl he lost. He didn't know where you were, and it tore him apart." Melina's gaze softened, and she looked down at the old phone in her hands, the image of Adam staring back at her. "I never thought he would remember me after all this time," she murmured, her voice fragile. "I thought he would have moved on, forgotten." "No, Mom," Rita said, taking her mother's hand in hers. "He never forgot. He's been carrying that love with him all these years, even when he didn't know where you were." Melina's eyes filled with tears again, but this time there was something else in them, something like hope. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. Rita squeezed her hand gently. Maybe it's time to stop running from the past, Mom. Maybe it's time to let yourself be happy again." Melina nodded slowly, her heart torn between fear and the possibility of a second chance. The echoes of the past still haunted her, but perhaps, with her daughter by her side, she could finally find the courage to face them. But who was that woman with the baby in her arms? Melina asked, her confusion evident as she reflected on the past. Rita shrugged. Maybe he was just baptizing the boy. He could be the godfather or something. Later, as they walked together along the seashore, the laughter and joy shared between them felt almost surreal. Rita found herself stealing glances at her parents, admiring them from a distance. It was hard to believe that, after all these years of living apart, isolated and lonely because of a simple misunderstanding, fate had brought them back together. And to think that Rita, unknowingly, had played a role in reuniting her mother with her father, it was almost like a dream. It felt wonderful. Rita had never seen her mother so full of life, so completely radiant. Melina's eyes sparkled with a light that had been missing for far too long. Rita knew in her heart that her mother's healing was just beginning, because now, at her side, stood the man who had always been the love of her life. He would protect her, shelter her from the harshness of the world, and make her feel safe again. Rita found a spot on the sand and sat down next to Monica, who was gently rocking her baby girl in her arms. Nearby, Alberto had stepped away to take a phone call, his voice low against the calming backdrop of the waves. "She just won't fall asleep," Monica sighed, her voice tinged with frustration as she tried to soothe her fussy baby. Rita smiled warmly. "How about I rock her for a while? You can take a break." Monica looked at Rita gratefully and handed her daughter over. As Rita hugged the baby close, her heart melted at the sight of the tiny angel in her arms. The baby's soft breathing and warm presence brought a sense of peace. "I'll sing you a lullaby," Rita said in a gentle tone. "It's one my mom used to sing to me when I was little. I'm sure it will help you drift off to sleep." With that, Rita began to sing softly, her voice like a warm breeze, carrying the melody to the baby. The wax of the candle melts quietly. It's already night outside. Sleep, my beauty, my gift from heaven, my daughter. The gentle wind rustles the curtain softly. The golden poppy flower, my baby sleeps. Your angel will take the silvery cobweb with love. He'll weave pure love into your sleep. The firmament will illuminate with its radiance. A star will shine, may it guard the tender sleep of little children. May it guard the tender sleep of little children. As Rita's lullaby floated through the air, Monica watched in awe. "God, I could listen to you for hours," she whispered softly, taking her now sleeping daughter back from Rita and gently placing her in the stroller. "She's finally asleep. I've been trying for 20 minutes. Rita smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart that she hadn't felt in a long time. The future suddenly seemed so much brighter. The decision had been made she would enroll in the conservatory, and her parents were fully supportive of her dream. As they all enjoyed the fresh sea air, it was as if the breeze had carried away their worries, and the ocean brought with it a promise of joy and endless happiness. What have you learned from this story? What is one lesson that touched you and that you plan to bring into your life? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you liked this video, please leave your comment, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiring stories.